Imagine waking up tomorrow to find the internet gone, planes grounded, global trade collapsed, and the world's most powerful nations falling one after another in just a few years. This is not a science fiction movie. This actually happened in 1177 BC, when planet Earth faced the greatest civilizational collapse in history. The Bronze Age, which represented the peak of development, suddenly crumbled. Giant empires like the Hittites in Turkey and the Mycenaeans in Greece vanished from existence as if the earth had swallowed them, and entire cities were burned and razed to the ground. The cause was a mysterious and terrifying enemy that history called the Sea Peoples, who came like locusts, leaving nothing standing, destroying all the civilizations of the ancient East until they reached the final gate, Egypt. How did Egypt survive this flood that drowned the world? And how was one pharaoh able, in a battle of life or death, to save human history? Welcome to the Lost Archive channel, where today we open the file on the end of the ancient world. Before we talk about the destruction, we must understand what we lost. The Late Bronze Age was not a primitive era as we believe, for the ancient world was surprisingly interconnected, resembling the globalization we live in today, with a club of great powers, including the king of Egypt, the king of the Hittites, the king of Babylon, and the king of Assyria, who exchanged diplomatic letters, gifts, and even doctors and engineers, while trading ships roamed the Mediterranean, laden with copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, and gold from Egypt in a complex and precise economic system. But complex systems are always fragile. At the end of the 12th century BC, disasters began to unfold. Earthquakes struck Greece, a drought lasting many years hit the region, and famines drove people to eat grass. And in the midst of this weakness, they appeared. Who were they? They were the Sea Peoples, the biggest mystery in archaeology, whom the ancient Egyptians called by strange names like the Peliset, Tjeker, Denyen, and Shekelesh. Historians today believe they were a coalition of tribes fleeing from southern Europe and the Mediterranean islands, driven to move by hunger. But they were not just an invading army, they were an armed mass migration, coming with their women, children, and ox-drawn carts, looking for new land and ready to kill anyone who stood in their way. The scenario was terrifying. Troy fell, Mycenae fell. Then came the turn of the powerful Hittite Empire, Egypt's traditional rival, whose capital, Hattusa, fell and was burned completely. We have a real distress letter found in the city of Ugarit in modern Syria before it was burned, in which its ruler says, "Enemy ships came. They burned my cities and did evil things in my country. All my troops and ships are not here. My country is abandoned to its fate." Shortly after writing this letter, Ugarit disappeared from history, and no great power remained standing in the region except Egypt. In 1177 BC, the Sea Peoples reached the borders of Egypt, and the pharaoh at that time was Ramesses III, the last of the great warrior pharaohs, who knew he was facing an enemy that had destroyed empires militarily stronger than him. Ramesses did not wait for them in the open desert, but decided to lure them into his own playground, the mouths of the Nile River. The Sea People's ships were designed for sailing the open sea, but they were heavy and difficult to maneuver in the shallow and branching waters of the Nile. On the walls of the temple of Medinet Habu in Luxor, Ramesses III recorded the details of his genius plan. He let them enter the mouth of the Nile with their fleet, then closed the trap, as thousands of Egyptian archers, the best in the ancient world, lined up on the banks of the Nile and rained arrows upon them, while at the same time the light and fast Egyptian fleet went out and began capsizing enemy ships using long hooks and dragging them to the shore to be finished off with swords and spears. Ramesses III says in his famous text, "Those who reached my boundary, their seed is not. I caused the Nile to be filled with their ships as if it were a wall of wood, and they were thrashing in the nets like birds. It was a massacre, but it was the massacre that saved civilization. Egypt won. The flood of the sea peoples stopped at the gates of the delta, and their waves broke on the rock of Egyptian civilization. Some of them were captured and settled in Canaan, modern Palestine, and later became known as the Philistines, or Peliset, from which the name Palestine came. But the victory came at a very high price. The Egyptian state treasury was drained, and after Ramesses III, Egypt began to enter a phase of economic weakness, witnessing the first workers' strikes, tomb robberies, and the disintegration of central authority. The ancient world collapsed, and humanity entered a dark age for centuries in which writing and arts were lost in Greece and Turkey. But thanks to Egypt's steadfastness, the flame of civilization was preserved. Temples remained open, and history continued to be recorded so that Egypt could hand this flame to future ages. The story of the Bronze Age collapse teaches us an important lesson. No matter how powerful and advanced civilization becomes, it is very fragile in the face of nature's disasters and human shifts. If you liked this journey through time, do not forget to subscribe to the Lost Archive channel. And tell us in the comments, have you heard of the Sea Peoples before? And do you think our world today is immune to a similar collapse? See you in a new historical adventure.